Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm really delighted that so many of you turned out to meet a debut author, because over the years, Lee Child had, I think, 3 people. Don Winslow had me. Michael Connolly might have had 15. It's never easy to be a first-time author and go out and talk about your book. However, maybe as a screenwriter, you've been beaten up so that this will be easy.
That's exactly right. I'm ready for anything.
You are.
Yeah.
Well, you might get anything,
Good.
including me coming apart. I think I'll just hold up the book. I wanted to make a little pitch before we started. We are doing, Poison Pen Press is doing 2 classic series this year for the first time. One of them is called The Haunted Library, and it's going to be a horror or ghost story or something every other month. And if you've been paying attention to what I write to you, the gothic novel and the horror novel and Edgar Allan Poe's, they're all storming back. Anyway, you might think you know Phantom of the Opera, but you really don't if you haven't read the book. So we thought it would be fun to have a classic crime discussion group, and we thought we'd try an afternoon, mostly because we don't have any evenings. So afternoon is about the only time we can do it. So Patrick, when is it? January 29th. And Patrick's going to lead the discussion. So if you like that, now in April, the Library of Congress crime classics are coming online. And we're, among other things, doing Sue Grafton's father's first book. But you might not have even known that C.W. Grafton preceded Sue as a best-selling Grafton. And he wrote a book called The Rat Began to Gnaw the Rope, which is the first line in that nursery rhyme, right? Anyway, so I'm thinking what we'll do is we'll have a once-a-month discussion alternating those, and maybe some British Library crime classics too. Afternoon may be difficult, but we can't promise you an evening, so that's the way it is. I can't fit everybody in as it is. We're having some tragic problems. Anyway, that's my pitch for Phantom of the Opera, and since I'm coming apart, I'll just hold the book. Yay. So Chris,
Hey.
Deep State.
Yeah.
Fascinating book. All right, this is for fans of Jack Reacher who wish that Jack were female. Probably none of you have. But in the event that you might have occasionally wondered why it couldn't have been a woman, we found her. She's great.
Haley Cho.
Haley, why did you decide? Well, first of all, what made you write a novel since you're a screenwriter?
Well, I've been a screenwriter for over 3 decades, and the movie business has changed quite a bit. I would guess the biggest reason why I chose to write a novel is because they don't make movies about human beings anymore.
You mean the Marvel comic franchise?
Right, and the reason why that happened is because the home video market fell apart. And so the movie studios had to find a way to replace that income. And they went overseas, and so now they make movies for the global market. And because of that, you can't make a movie about a person like you, a bookstore owner, or a fireman, or a lawyer in Scottsdale. It needs to be about a character that's going to appeal to a teenager in Mumbai and a housewife in Romania, and so you have to take away all those edges and all those idiosyncrasies that make the characters that I want to write about and the stories that I want to tell. You need to get rid of those. So it has a global appeal. And so TV picked up the mantle and makes stories about human beings. And that market has gotten very saturated, very difficult to get into. Deep State has been optioned by a television studio.
Oh, of course it has.
Of course it has. But I guess, I just felt like it was time to do something new. And I went out and had lunch with another screenwriter buddy of mine who similarly was spending weeks and months chasing after the same actors who might sign on to our projects, and then in that way potentially get it set up and potentially get made. And he told me he was writing a novel. And I had never considered writing a novel. I had written short stories in high school. I wrote poetry in college. I wrote plays, influenced very heavily by Sam Shepard, in New York after college. And then I fell into the whole movie biz. And the prospect of writing from margin to margin was terrifying for me, because a screenplay is probably about, 8,000 words, maybe 10,000 words at the most. So it seemed intimidating. And but I decided to give it a shot and took a couple different screenplays that I had and that I hadn't sold and took out parts of it and came up with the character of Haley Chill and built an outline and started writing without any real clear idea that it was going to go longer than a few days. And after one day of writing, I just realized that this was something that I loved to do. And the more I did it, within a week, I realized that there was so much more freedom in writing prose than I ever had as 3 decades of writing screenplays, that I was hooked. And
Plus, you could actually write it by yourself and not in a writer's room.
well, I've always been, all my credits are from film. I've written a couple TV pilots. I've never experienced the writer's room.
Oh.
I kind of sort of think that would be sort of fun in a way, because I have essentially been working alone in my office for the last 3 decades. But no, I didn't work with others. Others rewrote my work. One of my movies that got made, I was fired twice and hired 3 times. But I didn't meet those other writers who came in. But there's so many reasons why I think, for me personally, fiction writing, at least at this stage in my life, is more appealing. But I think the freedom that I've discovered in writing fiction has been a revelation. But the other great thing about, the other biggest difference between the movie business and the book business is happening right here, tonight. Because you cannot get one person in Hollywood to sit down and hear you discuss your screenplay. And even though that they potentially will make millions of dollars from your script, they still hate to read it.
Yeah, that reminds me of a great story Don Winslow told me when he was, I can't remember where he was in his career, but anyway, I think they might have made The Death and Life of Bobby Z, or whatever one of his great books was. But anyway, he went to a meeting in Hollywood to discuss making the screenplay of this book. And he saw some books on the desk, and just to make conversation, he said to whoever was holding the meeting,
I've heard this story.
yeah, did you enjoy that book, or did you read it, or whatever it is? And the man said, read it. He said, I have people who read.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my first job in Hollywood. I was a paid reader.
Sure.
So, as a professional writer, to be working in an industry where people hate to read is a little schizophrenic.
It's very schizophrenic. I've actually had this conversation with an awful lot of people that you might know. Thomas Perry, Sue Grafton, actually,
Right.
Joey Day, Matt Goldman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to remember the woman who was here with Joey Day. It was one of my favorite nights because we were having this discussion about how they loved writing books as opposed to writing for Hollywood, and they didn't want to go back to it and so forth. Somewhere in the conversation, she revealed that she was a writer on Person of Interest. And I just lit up like a light, and I said, why did it go that way? Because it was really a great show for like 3 or 4 years, and then suddenly the 2 dueling computer companies took over. All the people went away, and it was like these 2 corporate things that were just turned to shit, right? So and anyway, she said to me, she explained it to me, and then she said to me, the worst part, she said, is I had to write the penultimate episode when the female, do you remember, any of you watched it? Remember she's killed? And she said, I got all this hate mail, and then I decided to know that if I wrote books, this would never happen to me. And I was so delighted to know what really went wrong with Person of Interest. It was one of my favorite evenings. So that was the show I really loved. And in a way, there was a reason I brought that up, because I had this conversation Tuesday night with Nick Petrie and Andrew Grant, who's Lee Child's brother, so, the whole bit. There seems to be at the moment this real need for, not for like Marvel heroes, superheroes and all, but people who will take on a mission, who will try for some reason to accomplish something or right or wrong. And it used to be that it was private investigators that did that. They were loyal to the client. They didn't have to behave like the police. They didn't have rules. They could do all this great stuff. But now what we're getting is a series of ex-military people who have legitimate killing skills, you know, or whatever kind of skills that they've been trained in. And so Peter Ash is a vet with, you know, trying to find his way with missions. Paul McGrath that Andrew writes the same way. Reacher we already know. And so, you know, I find that fascinating. But what I really am surprised at is, except for, I think, Kathy Reichs, you're the first person I've read that has got a woman who's come out of the military and is finding her way in civilian life. And it's fascinating.
Well, I can tell you where it came from.
Okay.
The inspiration behind Haley Chill's character, unsurprisingly, is from a movie. One of my favorite movies. It's called Winter's Bone.
Oh, sure. Daniel Woodrell, wonderful writer.
Yeah, and Jennifer Lawrence plays a 17-year-old girl who's. Are you folks familiar with the movie?
Some of us
Quick
are.
recap. It's
Patrick, where are you? Because you probably memorized it.
She is the big sister to two young kids. Mother's relatively incapacitated, and they live in essentially a cabin in the hills of West Virginia. And father's been out of the picture a long time, in and out of jail, and he has posted bond and put the homestead up for collateral, and then jump bail. And so now they're going to take away the home. They're going to take away the homestead. Family's going to be homeless. And so Haley Chill, Lee Dolly, I think is her character name, Jennifer Lawrence, needs to find her father or prove that he's dead. And that puts her in the path of some really bad people who don't want any stones unturned. They don't want any questions asked. They're all cooking meth up in the hills. And she just will not back down. She just goes at it until she almost gets beaten to death. And she's a fantastic character. And it was a breakout role. But there's a scene in the movie where she's in high school and she goes to the military recruiter. And she wants to enlist because she's going to get a $40,000 bonus. And she wants to take that money and give it to her family so that save the family homestead. The recruiter sees right through her and says, no, you're not going to get that money for 8 months anyway, so it's not going to help you out. But I always thought, what if she'd gone to the military? Let's follow that character to the army, and then what is she going to do after that? And that's how I came up with the basis of that character. What happens next with her?
Well, and what happens next is she's winding up in the West Wing.
Yeah.
As an intern, right?
Yeah.
I love the description of her. She has an office she shares with 3 other interns that's about the size of a closet. And they're basically doing, and the 3 other interns are very privileged. They're the sort of interns that, and if they were in England, they would have been, sent down to do jobs in London that didn't actually require any real work.
They're younger than her. She's 25. They're probably 20, 21. They going to USC, they're going to Brown, they come from a privileged background, and then you have this Army vet who's older, speaks with a slight West Virginia accent, and is a real outsider, and everyone underestimates her continually.
Well, they're mean to her.
And they're mean.
It's kind of like, Mean Girls in high
Mean
school.
Girls, that was the TV producer pitched it that way, as Mean Girls in the West Wing.
Right, which we can easily envision. But nonetheless,
but that's not the movie.
No,
that's not the book.
Not. It's not a political thriller in the sense that you might think it was about politics. I think it's described as a political thriller, but I don't really feel that's a fair description.
Well,
just because it's set there doesn't mean that's what the story is.
It's not political, though. You're right.
No, it's not. I mean, because you say those words, and we all think it's going to be about the current divide, or because we're in a tough year anyhow. We're we're getting hit over the head with politics.
I defy anyone to come up with her party affiliation by the end of that book. I don't know what it is. I've never thought of it.
No, it's not about party politics. And anyway, so there she is, and because she's tough and she's mission trained in the hallway, she just keeps her head down and keeps working while they're all tweaking her and giving her a hard time. And then one day she's noticed by the chief of staff. I don't know if we should say all that more.
Yeah, that's usually where I stop.
In other words, Barbara, shut up and move on to some other. I'm okay with that.
I usually go up to the inciting incident. That's where I stop.
I'll carry on then.
Well, then she is championed by the chief of staff, and they bond over the fact that he's got a military thing. His father was a military guy, and he's always lionized the military correctly. And I think he sees through some of these young, ambitious, craven interns, and then there's Haley Chill,
Right.
and so he plucks her from the obscurity of the intern pen and assigns her special jobs. And one of those jobs is to show up at 5:30 in the morning with briefing books. And
I don't think we need to talk
that's
about that.
okay. That's
Right.
it.
Let's not do that.
Yeah, you're right.
But I could say she meets a really hot Secret Service agent. Ooh. And he's an interesting guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So they have a night of unrestrained sex, which is always good in a book. Or even, well, what can I say? In any case.
I'm going to let you say it.
No, I'm not saying another word, right? Anyway, that's sort of where it all begins. So a couple of those incidents, but I really admire Haley. You know, her quiet determination. And she has, you know, that sort of rare thing in Washington, a real moral compass at the moment. You know, where she's going to do the right thing regardless of the whatever the fallout might happen to be. Did you model the chief of staff at all on the chief of staff in the West Wing?
You know, you probably won't believe me.
Why, Mike?
I never watched that show. I didn't watch a lot of TV. So
Okay.
So I guess the answer is
No.
emphatic no.
But he is kind of like him.
Is he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Any of you watch West Wing?
Who played
Well,
the?
of course, you haven't read the book yet, so you can't actually agree or disagree with me here. But yeah, I don't remember. Does anybody remember? He's not an actor that I think was like a, you know, familiar name, but very good, but very much like your guy.
Mm-hmm.
So the way the book works, you set up Haley to be a continuing. This is the only spoiler. She doesn't die because she's set up to continue. Are you
Yes.
planning on doing that?
Oh yes. The follow-up book is written and essentially edited and ready to be delivered. Yeah. As you know, the book ends in a fairly dramatic fashion. It ends in a spectacular way, and we pick up not too long after that.
So did the Perils of Pauline scenario affect you slightly, or did you already know how to just do the hook?
Oh, you know, I think that might have been just, you know, the Hollywood training kicking in. I mean, I wanted to circle back to that idea of, you know, where I came from and the transition from Hollywood to the book world, and that, you know, writing for people who, I mean, I think there's vestiges of my screenwriting in my fiction writing, and reviewers have pointed it out. But the fact that you have to learn how to write for people who hate to read, in some ways is a good thing, because you need to, I think it trained me over those many decades to write in a very impactful, visceral, exciting way without, you know, I'm not going to waste a lot of your time, because the people I was writing for so long, I needed to hold their interest. And so I think the idea of a kind of a cliffhanger ending, or the idea of a franchise character, all those things are carry forwards from writing for cinema.
It would be a shame to waste her on just one book. You know, she is a franchise character.
And she's 25, so there's a good chance that she'll outlast me too. So.
Don't age her in real time.
Fortunately, neither of my sons are writers. One's a doctor and one's a musician, so I don't think they can pick up the man.
Let me refer you to Michael Connelly and what's happened to Harry, because he did age in real time. And one day the LAPD said, "Gotta go, Harry."
Yeah,
right. So no, I think it's wonderful. Oh, she's gone. I was going to ask Dana to comment, because after I read the book. I gave it to Dana, living in our bedroom as she does for a couple months a year, and she agreed with me that, as you know, I have to sift through all the books that come out every month. Some of them I read all the way through, some of them I don't. When I'm looking for a first novel, what am I really looking for? The truth is, I read for voice. I've told you that. If I really love the voice, I can forgive, and I'm not saying that there are deficiencies in the plot, because that's not what I mean. But I don't really read for the story. When I'm looking at a new author, I am reading for the voice. Is this one I like? And is there some possibility for this author to continue? And both of those, I thought you were the outstanding January example of both of those things.
That's great. Thank you.
So I can tell talking to you that that's why your books are really, the voice is great, right? Can you not already tell? Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, really a pleasure. Plus your publisher would kill me if I didn't do something, dramatic for you.
It's good. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. I mean, my story is ridiculous. I have friends in LA who have been hammering at their books for a long time, and I started writing Deep State in May of 2018. We sold it in November of that year. The publisher, Simon Schuster, Emily Bessler, has been extraordinary in their support.
She likes books like yours. You got to the right person. I've known her for a long time.
Well, my agent did, and it was the first person we went to.
Yeah.
I mean, she was the first one to see the book. She bought it within a few days.
Right. Yeah. Well, timing is everything, as we know.
And
We're going to find that out this year as we move along.
She was midway through it and reported back to Anne an email saying she was loving it. What's his idea for the follow-up? And I was like, follow-up? So,
you never want to look unprepared when talking to a
publisher. I didn't look unprepared. I could fake it. So 45 minutes later, we had the idea for the second book.
Well, it helps that you're a professional writer, and therefore didn't go into a complete panic at that question. I've had many authors sit here and tell me about, the big gulp when
what's that?
Because they never expected their book to even get published, and so when it does, they are completely. You can take your whole life to write your first book, and you're lucky to get 12 months to write your second. So it's a pretty terrifying thing to have.
Yeah, I didn't have any. I did not have a problem. It was, I have been churning out scripts, and I'm very organized. I've never had a day of writer's block in my life, and so all those years that of screenwriting, I think, have gone into the salad bowl of this of what you're holding there.
You've acquired discipline, and reporters generally don't have writer's block. We have a lot of authors who started out as reporters. They seldom suffer from writer's block because they're professional writers, right? You just have to turn it out. Lawyers generally are good because they're accustomed to writing on a daily basis. So
what kind of writers do have writer's block? Probably then.
Well, I probably can sift out the ones that don't more easily than the people who do. The other great thing about crime fiction is that it does come with a story structure. It really does, I've had, over the years, many authors say that the reason they ended up, some of them write because that's what they love to read. And it's important, I think, that you like to read it so you can write it with enthusiasm. But that blank page is a little scary, and, there are known plot structures for different kinds of crime novels. There's I have a little geometry talk I can actually do about the structure of crime novels. Mm-hmm. But an Agatha Christie story is essentially a circular plot, and everything inside it, it has to happen inside it because you have to have a closed circle of suspects and a detective who somehow was trapped in it, and therefore is the person to investigate it. A thriller takes that circle and opens it up because the thriller's a chase between an antagonist and a protagonist. Mm-hmm. But it's a chase, a known chase, and so you know that when you start it at some point. A caper's like a puzzle, where you throw all the pieces up in the air, and then they all kind of come down, but they have to come together at the end. Mm-hmm. That was guys like Donald Westlake or Ross Thomas, Tim Mullany, a new author. The movie The Sting is just a great example of a caper. And then if you have a suspense novel, it's like a fugue. You start small and you have to build it up. And it's just like Tristan, it's like the Liebestod Christian that's older. You go up here and it just goes, you know, that's the don't go into the attic, don't go into the attic. No, you went into the attic. Oops. But it has to end that way. And then we have this weird new hybrid, the trust no one, where everybody lies all the time and you can't rely on anything being true. I don't like that genre at all. I really don't. You know, partly it's because I don't really want to spend time with those people because they're not particularly, generally they're not going to be likable. They're going to be, if you have two liars basically competing and you have to figure out which one is the worst liar or the real liar, I mean, like after a while you think, why am I watching this? Or actually reading it. So, but the good news is that if you write a crime novel, you can pick one of those structures depending on the story you want to take, so it's not so scary to look at that blank page and think, how do I go? Probably not a problem for you because you're used to writing film, you know, scripts, but for a lot of people, it would be.
Yeah, I just work, you know, I don't look at, I used to years ago, and when I was first learning how to write screenplays, I would take a favorite movie and diagram it out. But they're not very complicated. Movies aren't very complicated. The 3-act structure is not very complicated. So with the book, it's, you know, the first one is laid out pretty much like fairly much like a 3-act structure. It could be very easily adapted for a movie. But as I move forward, you know, I just kind of, you know, I have this great character, and I'm thinking about, unlike a lot of the other authors in this genre, I'm going to focus on the home front, the domestic scene. You know, she's about, I can't go into too much detail here without giving away.
That will be spoilers for sure.
But her interests are in, I can say that her character is based on the idea of preserving the Constitution and what it means for this country, and that the people in power are adhere to the Constitution. That's her overarching goal. So with that in mind, I'm not chasing, you know, guys with suitcase bombs through the, you know, Cairo airport or whatever, you know. So I'm going to keep things based here, for at least for the foreseeable future. I have the first 4 books
In your head?
in my head.
That's
Not
great.
the complete book, but the 3rd book is outlined, and the 4th book I have a really cool idea for.
So if you were British, you'd be writing MI5 and not MI6. Wouldn't be James Bond.
Right.
Speaking of which, I saw the preview for the new James Bond when I went to see Little Women. I'm really excited. Daniel Craig. But you know what I liked even better at the preview? Was Peter Rabbit. Peter Rabbit is absolutely adorable. I hardly ever go to the movies because I'm home reading thousands of books, but I'm seduced by Peter Rabbit, who's this adorable puppet. I'm sure he's well, not a puppet, but what's the
Animated.
Thank you. Yes, he's great. Yeah. So, all right. Questions from the audience. We probably said all that we can say, and I did say that he, as you've now heard, is a screenwriter. So if you have questions that have nothing to do with the book, but have to do with screenwriting, you should ask them.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to know, if the society wasn't doing what it was doing now in movies, what would be your next plot, or what would you like to write for something if it were continuing in the genre that you like, the screenplays? What would you like to write about or have about in the movies?
I'm confused.
Well, I guess I'm not saying it very well. In other words, you said you quit screenwriting because of the way people don't want humans in it anymore.
It was purely a business decision because it was just increasingly difficult. I mean, the mere fact that I could keep a screenwriting career going for 35 years is fairly remarkable. Even more important than an Oscar or writing, an Oscar for writing, is earning certified retiree health in the Writers Guild, which I did. You need to put in 22 hours or 22 years of earned employment to get that, and very few guys get that. So. But it was still, I was still getting work, but it was increasingly, I was doing sniper movies for the straight-to-DVD sniper movies for Sony Home Video, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And I have drawers filled with screenplays. None of my credits are movies that I originated. I would write these kick-ass, in my opinion, and other people agreed, screenplays about, gladiators, or I wrote a political thriller called Inauguration Day, and they wouldn't get made, but they would get me work, and then I would go write a sniper movie. So, your question then,
What would you like to write about then? I mean, if you were still in that business.
I love to write. I've been writing forever. I mean, as I said early on, since I was in high school. So, I can write anything. It's what the markets will let me write. Like I said, I have a Gladiator script that never got purchased because I ended up writing it about 30 seconds before Ridley Scott's Gladiator got released or got announced, and my script was called Gladiator as well. I would love to adapt that as a novel, but I don't think there's much of a marketplace for dramas set in antiquity. Are there?
Well, actually, you may be at the bottom of the ascending curve, because
You never know.
when I started the store 30 years ago, historical fiction was totally dead, and everybody like Samuel Schellenberger and all those people had stopped writing historical fiction because they couldn't sell it. And to his point, and to say to you, to be a professional writer means you actually have to sell your work and get paid. So it doesn't do you any good to write, just because you love it or whatever. Anyway, so everybody leapt into writing historical mystery. So we got Brother Cadfael, we got Ellis Peters, we had The Name of the Rose, we had,
Yeah, it's possible.
we had Egypt, we had Rome. We never got Babylon, and Greece didn't sell, but Rome sold really well. Egypt sold really well. Middle Ages sold really well. 18th century, nobody wanted to read. 17th century, totally dead. Victorian sold really well. And then, because there was too much of it, well, now this is what happens in genre fiction. There becomes a glut. And at that point, this is what I'm hoping is happening to Trust No One, because I just don't ever want to read another one. And it did happen. It happened with serial killers after Silence of the Lamb. It happened with Da Vinci clones, because there were just so many bad versions of Dan Brown. Eventually, everybody said, don't want to read that. Remember Twilight? That one, they die of their own weight because too many people come in and write them, and they become trite, and not a lot of them are good, and so everybody gets bored and wants to know what's the next new thing. Historical fiction then has disappeared, and it's now just starting to come back. So there is hardly anyone writing about Rome. So you may have actually timed this. Listen to me.
I will. That's been my operating principle, business principle for years, which is to go where the people ain't.
Exactly.
And that was one of the, some of the choices I made. There weren't a lot of female protagonists. I had started writing female protagonists in my screenwriting career about 10 years ago. And because people weren't writing them.
Let me tell you what, if this were 1997, when everything was the woman sleuth, and it was Sue Grafton and Marcia Muller and whatever, I had men weeping on my shoulder and saying they were going to have to pretend to be female in order to sell a book, because that's all publishing wanted right then. That was another of those trends. And they all had to have a boyfriend or some kind of significant other. It could have been a father or brother, whatever, in law enforcement, because private investigators and amateur sleuths can't actually arrest anybody. So it became just this paradigm,
Right.
And they would also develop, they would have jujitsu as a side skill, so they could defend themselves, so they didn't need a guy. It just became really boring. And that's what happens. So your screenplays may bring you back into, it's about a 20-year role. That's what, if I finished my doctorate at Stanford, I never could find a subject that I wanted to live a PhD dissertation through, so I quit with master's degrees. But I realize now that if I were going to do it, I would write about the role of genre role in fiction. And it's about every 20 years, because what you need is a new population of readers who have not read all of that stuff and gotten bored with it. And so that's why I said at the start of this that the horror and the gothic was coming back, because it's been gone for 20 years, and all of a sudden everybody's going, I've been assaulted with it in the last little, it's dark, it's a horror, it's a gothic, and all. Gothic has become a genre. And nobody, 5 years ago, if I'd said it's a Gothic book, everybody would have gone, what's that? So, have hope.
Questions?
That was a long answer you didn't want from me. Right? Sorry.
I've met Kenton through the Twitter. He's been very nice and supportive.
So your question
Thank you
is?
so much. So glad you're here. The so you were talking about the difference between writing screenwriting and then writing the prose of a novel, and that and the difference being that writing a novel gave you more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, what aspect of that process of writing as a novelist was challenging? You said it was freeing, but in what respects was it challenging?
This is where I sound like an asshole. Nothing was challenging. It was like being let out of a straitjacket. I just.
Okay, but if there's one real difference between screenwriting and novel writing, it's screenwriting is almost all dialogue, and in novel writing,
Well, not necessarily.
well,
I mean,
a lot of dialogue.
What the screenplay, any professional screenwriter knows that a screenplay should only put down on paper what the camera sees,
Right.
and that and only what's important, and that's interesting. I mean, because you need to really use your head, because the camera, you only have so much real estate, you only have so much time, so you're going to, those shots, each shot, it's like a mop bucket by the door, and there's a clock ticking, the time, it means something. Everything signifies something that the camera sees, and then what the microphone picks up, whether it's sound effects or the dialogue. But a book, it can be anything. You're inside the heads, you can zip back and forth in time, you can talk about things that no movie's ever going to record, because you've only got 110 minutes maximum, maybe, unless you're Martin Scorsese, then you've got the
Extra time.
3 hours.
But you also need to write the landscape, because the camera is not showing it to you. Listen, I'm the editor of a very good screenwriter who is trying to do what you are doing, and I have nearly gone nuts trying to pull. I mean, his manuscripts are like 98 pages or something. And I keep saying, not enough there. He's so used for the camera, filling in all that stuff, that I actually have to drag out,
Yeah, he's having a hard time.
Very hard time.
Yeah, he's got to put on some good music and let it go.
He's gotten better. He's
Yeah.
really gotten better, but it's hard for him because, it's just...
Well, you're trained, because if you put that stuff in the screenplay, they'll laugh you out of their office and they won't buy your script.
Right. Or you can have this problem. Diana Gabaldon was telling me back, because she wrote a script for Outlander. You should know we're neighbors, and I'm her bookseller, and the whole 9 yards. So we were having a discussion. When she went over there to do the filming, she had a great scene that she absolutely loved. But the castle they were filming this particular scene in, the geography of the room did not allow what she had written to happen. It just couldn't, and they weren't going to knock down the castle or bash a hole in the wall or something to make. So she had to re-visualize how the scene would work to fit the parameters of the set. And if you're a screenwriter, maybe you never see the set. They construct the set to fit your script. I don't know, but when they're renting a castle in Scotland, it doesn't really work that way. So that was a lesson for her about the difference between filming, writing a script, and writing a novel. You don't have complete freedom in the script to do what you want if you've got actors and sets that you have to conform to.
In screenwriting, it's all about accommodation. Everything is accommodation, whether it's to a director or to a studio executive, to the conditions, that the budget. Those things all have to be accommodated, and the writer is the last person that really has the final say. Your job is to take all those variables, and make it work. And that's why I haven't encountered any challenges, because all I'm experiencing is freedom of just being able to use the language and tell the stories, and so there's no challenge. It's fantastic. It's really great.
You had a question, sir?
Yes, it sounds like your stories are character driven by this one woman. in either your screen writing or in developing these fictions, how much time do you spend just sort of researching and trying to figure out what the plot is? I mean, do you go through half a dozen plot ideas, or is it basically you know who your character is, and then the character is what determines how the story goes?
Well, I don't think anything is truly character driven, because then you're not really, I would imagine if you didn't outline, then, and you really let your character dictate at the end of each day where you might go the following day, then that would be, I guess, more truly character driven writing. Like I said, I outline, and I'm a structuralist. I think about the structure and laying it out, and usually it's, I start with the most basic building blocks of, like, the basic ideas of the story, beginning and end. And then I start filling in the bigger blocks between those two places, and then building blocks in between until I have, what seems like a pretty good story. And then I just sit on it for a while, and I look at it. I have it on about 10 pages, 8 or 10 pages of a bullet outline. I just look at it, and I keep reading it and finding weak places in it. And it's really just plot. And then when I write the first draft, that's the fun part, and that's the really, ecstatic part. The building the story out and the research is drudgery in my opinion, but absolutely necessary to get it right so that I can really fly in the first draft, and lots of discoveries every day. When you're writing that first draft where you didn't really think so much about the inside of those scenes. You just need to get from point A to B to C to D. That's all you're doing. And then I don't bother trying to figure out how she's going to figure stuff out or what exactly is going to happen. And then the characters just kind of come to life in a day's writing, and it works out. That's writing, at least for me. The research, I didn't do a lot of research for Deep State. A lot of it, you'll see when you read the book, it doesn't require a ton of, because so much of it is in our psyche, the White House. So I chose to do things a little bit differently. There was a couple books I found written by insiders. I just wanted details that I could sprinkle into the narrative, so that, just little bits that give it an authentic feel. But I don't want to bore you with overwhelming, describing, the actual meals that they might serve in the Navy mess and on the bottom floor. I mean, does anyone really care? So I'll make that up. But I want to know where the Navy mess is and what it looks like, and that's all found on the internet. The second book, the follow-up, was about cyber terrorism, and that required quite a bit more research. So I read a bunch of books on cyber terrorism, and then I bought a generator. and 30 days worth of freeze-dried food.
I got a marketing idea for you. You can sell every book with a coupon. 20% off whatever the generator is. Oh, Lord, that's a great idea. Well, I'll talk to your publisher about those ideas. But you know what? That was a fabulous exposition of a plotter, because there are two schools of writers. We have this going on here all the time. Tuesday night, we had we have one plotter, and then we have what's called a pantser, a writer who writes by the seat of his pants.
Right.
And one of the inevitable problems if you're a pantser is you end up throwing a lot of stuff away because it doesn't go, doesn't always work out. And that's a drawback. But some writers are only happy if they are being surprised by developments on what their characters will do. And then other writers...
But I think that happens with a plotter. Like I said, little things happen, and I'm just
but you start with the structure.
Yes.
And, and that's the difference, really. And I thought that was actually a very brilliant discussion of what it is to plot. So I thank you. Patrick, you've heard loads of these stories too, right? You agree?
Absolutely. Totally.
Did you miss the Daniel Woodrell part?
No, I heard.
Oh, you did hear it. I was suspecting you to leap over here. Patrick's
he's
an
the best.
enormous fan of Daniel Woodrell. So there we go. Anyone else have a question? Oh, come on.
I like the cover a lot.
Well, I can tell you a story about that.
Go for it.
When I sold the book, they said the first thing to do, you had to build a website, and I didn't have a website. I had very little social media presence. As a screenwriter, you really don't need it. You're supposed to stay under your rock, more or less.
That's a great book title. I want you to remember that. Stay under your rock as a singer.
So I hired a guy, a friend of a friend, to build a website for me, and we thought I needed a mock-up of the book, because you always have the book on the author website. And this was early in the process. Simon Schuster had not come up with the cover yet. And so my guy's very talented, and he came up with a cover mock-up that was very similar to this. Upside down.
Have you read the book?
I don't think so. I told him about it. Upside down, very similar, same graphic idea. And same kind of typeface, blocky typeface. And I showed my prototype of the website to the publisher, and they were like, take that mock-up down, take it down. We don't want to confuse people because we don't know what the cover's going to be. So I took it out. We took out the mock-up out of the website and put up the website. And then a number of weeks later, I get an excited email. We have the idea for the cover. We're going to send it to you. My guy was not pleased. I told them that he'd come up with it. There wasn't a lot I could do except let them know that, he came up with this idea. But it was originally white. And did you see the art when it was
Well,
white?
I was just going to say, if you want to see what the original cover looked like, or the advanced reading copy, here
There
it
it
is.
is.
You can hold it up, but I put it up on the store Instagram because it is in fact quite different.
And so that was out, and everyone seemed to be happy with it. I was okay with that, but I don't know anything about this business. So if New York City and the publisher thinks it's I was like, yeah, I guess that's good. But then
Sometimes they're right.
sometimes they're right.
Sometimes
They
they're
were right when they selected my book.
Right. However, it is important to keep this in mind. Pastels do not work well in crime fiction. It's a conversation I have with the publisher quite often.
Well,
You really don't want a lot of pinks and yellows and stuff. Soft yellows, but definitely not pink.
One of I think it was Barnes and Noble's book buyer or someone like that, said they read the book and they said, this is a great book. It's a very scary book. You need a more ominous cover, so they made it black.
Yeah, it is dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like thrillers upside
Yes, sir.
I think you've already optioned the screen.
Yeah.
And if so, do you want to do the screen, or would you allow another script?
Oh, well, that brings up an interesting conversation. No, I've been doing this a long time, writing screenplays, and truth be told, when I first sat down to do it, there was a thought in my mind of like, I'm going to write a book, and hopefully I'm going to sell it, and then that's how I'm going to get a movie made, And by the time I finished the book, I was kind of like thinking, yeah, I kind of like writing fiction more. And then in the following months, I've decided quite firmly that I'm a novelist first and a screenwriter second. But so we did option it, and I was supposed to be, I was meant to be the writer of it. Why not? I've been doing it forever. I don't have a lot of experience in TV, however. That doesn't really make that much difference, but Hollywood being Hollywood, they very quickly sort of, what's the word? They pushed me out of the way. They brought another guy in to sort of work with me, and then it became very clear that everything that this guy thought was right, and everything that I thought was right was wrong. And I had gone into it with, I should have known better, but I had gone into it with some expectations that this was going to be different because I had written the book, for crying out loud. But I'll tell you a story. It's a pretty good story. It just gives you an idea of how it works. Like I said, they more or less invited a collaborator to work with me, and I was kind of okay with that because I was getting more and more into the idea of writing books, and hey, let someone else do all the hard work of selling it to the studio and come up with a pitch. It's an enormous amount of work to sell a TV show to a network, even with the book already written, because then there's a whole lot that goes into it. And but it's important to like maintain as much integrity of the book in the show, because sometimes they can buy your book and you will not recognize a single thing, you know. And so I was keen to do that. And one of the first things I had to attend to was the title, because there already is a TV show called Deep State. It's on FX or somewhere. It's an international show, I think, so it's not on network. But it's Deep State, stars Mark Strong, this great actor, and so okay, we had to come up with a new title. I knew that, granted. So my idea was inspired by Bosch. I mean, there's no book in that franchise called Bosch. It's this titular character. Why not call the show Chill, right? And so I sent an email to my team, my non-writing producers who had wined and dined me and treated me so well until I signed on a dotted line, and then things kind of incrementally started to change. And then my collaborator, the director, a TV director, done a lot of work, but who this was going to be the first thing that he would be a writer on, because everyone wants to be a writer in TV. That's how you really gain ownership. And so I wrote an email to those three guys, and I laid out the idea of like title, you know, and what if we, in sort of in the vein of Bosch, what if we call our show Chill? And it was just a short email, and it took a number of hours for them to respond, which is a bad sign. And finally, my collaborator wrote an email back that said, every time someone says the word chill, I feel the exact opposite. Haley Chill, where did that name come from anyway? Maybe that's something we should think about. Meaning change it. So I realized that it was not going to be a fruitful collaboration. He's gone. They've renewed the option and promised that this time I'll have less interference. We'll see.
I thought maybe you were going to say we went into your drawer of scripts that were not accepted. I have the script right here.
No, you know, it's going to be a different thing. It needs to be blown out. There's not 10 episodes of, there's not 10 hours of TV in that book, so it'll
You should
change.
actually get by with 6. Actually, we just got through, Dana and I just got through watching Sanditon, and we absolutely think it should only be
Yeah,
6.
it's hard to get 6 episodes. They like to do at least 10, but the English, the BBC shows will do 6 episodes.
Yes, they do. This would be a great moment to say goodbye to our Facebook audience. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. Does anybody have a question they don't want?